webinar. So we've got a great crew here to talk about the IRA and what it has to do with energy efficiency and building heat. We at Clean Energy New Hampshire, I think, have the benefit of getting to interact with a lot of different people from all over New England. And I think the folks that are on this call are the ones that I have found to be the most helpful when it comes to helping me personally understand what's in the IRA with regards to how it's going to reduce emissions from building heat. And so I'm really glad to have curated this selection of experts for you all, and also to just sort of step up to the side and let them do their thing. So first, you are going to hear from Aaron Cosgrove and Aditi Dalal, who are with the Northeast Energy Efficiency. Oh gosh, I'm gonna whiff what the P is for. What is the P for in the
partnerships?
Partnership, not projects, which is what I was gonna say. Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership. And they're going to be followed by Dana Fisher, who is with Mitsubishi. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions until the end. We'll let them both run through their presentations, and then we'll take the questions as a pack at the end, because we just don't want to if one panelist has answers to your question, we'll just let them get to their slides first before you start to ask them. So hold your questions, and then I will moderate them. You can enter them into the Q&A, which is down at the bottom of your screen. And I'll just sort of pull out questions and try to group some of them together if there are repeat questions, and we'll take them as they come. So without any further ado, I'll hand it off to the folks at NEEP.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. And I will go ahead and share our presentation. So as Sam said, hello. We are from NEEP, or Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. My name is Aaron Cosgrove, and I'll be presenting to you about deploying the Inflation Reduction Act in New Hampshire with my colleague Aditi Dalal. Before we get started, just a little background information about NEEP. So NEEP is a Regional Energy Efficiency Organization, or RIO, which basically means that we operate throughout the Northeast region, and there's complementary RIOs throughout the whole entire United States, and we kind of work as a conduit between the federal government and the states to help regional market transformation and adoption of energy efficiency and grid optimization technologies that align with state energy and equity goals. And with that, we will outline the agenda of our quick presentation on the Inflation Reduction Act for you today. So we'll be diving into codes, tax credits, green bank, rebates, workforce, and then finally at the end, just some ideas for potential considerations and next steps for implementation for New Hampshire. So first, just going over what's in codes for the bills. So the Inflation Reduction Act includes a section on zero building energy code adoption, which has $1 billion in energy code adoption and grants. And this grant includes $330 million to states and local governments to adopt the most recent code. And this is residential or commercial codes that meet or exceed the 2021 IECC or ASHRAE 90.1 2019 or better in new and also renovated buildings. And this funding can also be used for training, enforcement compliance, and measures to measure the yearly rate of compliance. It also includes $670 million to states and local governments to adopt a zero energy code. So this isn't adopting a residential and commercial building code that meets or exceeds zero energy provisions in the 2021 IECC building codes. And also you can implement a plan for the jurisdiction to achieve full compliance with any zero energy building codes. There's also no state match requirement for these grants, but like many things in the Inflation Reduction Act, when and how it will be distributed is still to be determined. And with that, I'll pass it off to Aditi to talk about tax credits.
Thank you, Erin. Yes, I'll be taking tax credits. Next slide, please. So first we have the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Credit, or 25C. Where households can deduct up to 30% of the cost of upgrades, such as heat pumps and insulation. And this is kind of divided into two parts. So there's $1,200 available for various purchases and installations that are listed below. And then there's an additional $2,000 credit for heat pumps. And these can be renewed yearly, so households can continue to make those improvements and take advantage of the tax credit. And it starts in January of next year and goes until 2031. Next slide. And then we have the residential clean energy credit, or 25D, and the IRA extends it to 2034, and the new provisions take place starting next year. And here, homeowners can deduct part of the cost of installing solar panels, ground source heat pumps, solar water heaters, and battery storage systems that are greater than 3 kilowatt hours. And the IRA kind of staggers it over the years. So homeowners can deduct up to 30% until 2032, 26% in 2033, and 22% in 2034, kind of incentivizing homeowners to make those upgrades early on and get the most benefit. Next slide. And then we have the commercial buildings energy efficient tax deduction, or 179D. And that's for businesses who, if they achieve 25% to 50% reductions in site energy use intensity over existing buildings performance standards, can receive up to $2.50 to $5 per square foot. And for tax exempt organizations such as government buildings or nonprofits, this can be passed down to designers of the building. Retrofits also qualify by showing a 25% decrease in energy use intensity. And also, the deduction doesn't apply for the life of the building. It can be applied every 3 years for commercial buildings and every 4 years for governmental buildings. And this also starts in 2023. And the table below kind of lists out the different categories and how they're allocated. Next slide. And then we have the new energy efficient home credit, or 45L. And that is for developers who build homes meeting certain energy performance standards as qualified by the DOE. And those are listed out in the table, and the different credits are also listed out as well. And this includes new single and multifamily homes, manufactured homes, and existing homes that are going under deep retrofits. And this is also available starting in 2023. Next slide. And then we have the commercial and utility renewable energy investment tax credit, or 48. And this offers a 30% investment tax credit for installing commercial geothermal heat pumps. And it goes from 2024 to 2034. And people can also take an additional 10% credit if the commercial geothermal heat pump is made in the US. And then on top of that, another 10% if it is installed in an energy community. And there's a lot of qualifications for energy community, which are listed below. So a brownfield site, a coal mine that closed in 2000 or later, and many more. And it is also saleable and tradable for taxed entities. Next slide. And I also just wanted to use this here and kind of explain what can and can't be combined, because we've gotten a lot of questions in the past about this. So the tax credits in the IRA can all be combined together, and with state tax credits, and utility rebates and new federal rebates, and all of these can all be combined together. The only exception is that the new federal rebates in the IRA cannot be combined with each other, and Erin will be going over those in a little bit. But I just wanted to clarify here. Next slide. Yes, and then I'll be going a little bit into the Green Bank, which is also called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which allocates $27 billion to the EPA until September 30th of 2024. They're all competitive grants, but they're kind of broken down into 3 different categories. There's $7 billion available for low income and disadvantaged communities to benefit from zero emissions technologies. And the administrators for this would be the state, local, and tribal governments and nonprofits. And then there's $12 billion available for financial and technical assistance to projects that reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions. And the administrators for that would be nonprofits. And then $8 billion for financial and technical assistance to projects that reduce or avoid greenhouse gas emissions in low-income and disadvantaged communities. And nonprofits are also the administrators for that. And I think that's it for me, so I will hand it back to Erin.
Great, thank you much, Aditi. And so now I'll be going over rebates, workforce, and next steps for implementation. So the two rebates in the Inflation Reduction Act that we'll be talking about today are the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate, or HERA, and the Homeowner Managing Energy Savings Rebates, or HOMES. And so just a very quick overview of what these rebates can benefit and can bring to New Hampshire. Some data from Rewiring America, and then also some rough math that I did myself. So first is all of these rebates and benefits have the potential to create 6,988 direct jobs and over 24,000 total new jobs. It also has the potential to reduce energy bills for 531,000 households, saving about 1,000 per average on year. And the state will receive funding of about 34 million for the HEEHR or HERA, and again, a number over 34 million to fund homes. And then the potential for both of these programs, HERA could potentially impact 2,000 to 3,500 homes in the state, and homes could potentially reach about 3,500 to almost up to 14,000 residents, depending on how the program is implemented. So first, I'll go into the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act, or HERA. So as I already highlighted, the state will receive over 34 million to fund electrification of low and moderate income households only. The program will cover appliances, installation costs, and other enabling measures such as upgrading circuit panels, insulation, air sealing, ventilation, and wiring. But the program can only apply if you're replacing a non-electric appliance. And as I said before, HERA could potentially impact about 2,000 to 3,500 homes in the state. And I'll walk through kind of how I got there as you look over this slide, which breaks down the rebate levels that HERA could bring to the state. And so on this slide, you can see that low-income residents are eligible for up to 1,000% of electrification project costs, up to $14,000. Moderate income residents are also eligible for up to $14,000 or 50% of their program costs. And so if the state were to refund at about $14,000 for every home done, that gets you to about 2,000 homes. And then also something that adds or an additional incentive that is also included in HERA is that contractors are eligible for up to $500 in rebates for working in LMI communities, and this is per project. And as I said, the HERA rebates cover non-electric appliances replacements only, but as you can see, it's not just heat pumps, it also does stoves, heat pump dryers, and electric wiring. And then also for next steps with HERA, so state energy offices must submit plans to receive the funding within the next 2 years. And below we outline some important parts of the plans that states will need to look at, which includes rebates at point of sale, and also not combining this with other federal grants. As Aditi highlighted in her presentation, this program, HERA and HOMES, can't be combined together. So when you're thinking about stacking programs and what HERA can look like in deployment, you have to remember that it cannot be combined with HOMES, but it can be combined with tax credits and also can be combined with the Energy Office or state and utility programs. And then also for timing, right now we're hearing that through November and January, DOE will hold a series of listening sessions where groups can bring any points up or highlight any issues they see with implementation. And then there'll be an RFI expected in early 2023. And then assuming the state implements everything on the timetable when it's released, rebates could be available to customers in late 2023. The next rebate I'll go over is the home energy performance based, or the whole home rebates, or HOMES. This is also 34 million in rebates for the state of New Hampshire, but this covers really just whole home retrofit packages, and the rebates will be dispensed based on the reduction in home energy use for the home. Unlike the HERA rebate, this can be used to replace existing electric appliances. And then also through the state of New Hampshire, HOMES has the potential to impact about 3,500 to 7,000 homes just within this state. Here is also a breakdown of the funding. So you could see the opportunity for savings. So for homes, you can get a rebate both off either measured or modeled savings for a project. And then the other unique aspect about homes is that LMI rebates are doubled. And so this again can be really used to drive retrofits in LMI communities and targeting towards those residents. And then this program also includes a contractor incentive of $200 for performing retrofits in homes that are located in underserved communities. And then we also have next steps or considerations for homes, and the important thing to also highlight, similar to the HERA Act, is that state energy offices must submit plans within the next 2 years. It's also important to highlight that state energy offices have the ability to increase the rebates for LMI households in case they feel like more funding is needed. We also have broken down how this program can be stacked, so it cannot be combined with HERA, but it can be combined with tax credits and with other state energy office or state utility programs. And then the timing is similar to the HERA Act, so there'll be listening sessions coming up in November through January at DOE. And then I will now move quickly onto the workforce training grant. So the workforce training grant is the state-based home energy efficiency training grant. And this is $200 million for state-based home contractor training grants to be distributed through the state energy program. And these grants will support energy efficiency and electrification contractor training through reducing the costs of contractor training, providing testing and certification of contractors, and partnering with nonprofits to develop and implement a state program. And with that, I will wrap our very quick overview of what is in the IRA, and we look forward to your questions, everyone. Thank you.
All right, so without further ado, let's hand things over to Dana Fisher, who's our next presenter. Thank you very much, Aaron and Aditi. And again, I'm seeing some questions trickling in. We're happy to try to answer some of those once we get to the main Q&A, but I'm going to hold off on reading the questions out loud until we've been through Dana's slides as well. Great, Dana, take it away.
Super. Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much, Aaron and Aditi. That was fantastic coverage of all the different details on how the laws are written and operating, and and drilling down into the impact in New Hampshire. I'm going to continue that conversation, kind of work off of that, and go over some of the sort of nuance of how the program might be rolled out to the individual states. So I'll share my screen now. And to there we go. Okay. You can see that, Sam? Is that all right? Okay. I'm just going to keep going. So
looks great.
Thanks. So, I'm Dana Fisher. I've been with Mitsubishi Electric for 5 years. I was the area manager for Maine and New Hampshire for a number of years, and I've since moved to the utilities team and then subsequently to the regulatory team. So I'm monitoring a lot of different federal legislation and rules and engaging with codes at the different levels as well with my team. And obviously there's been a huge amount of excitement about the Inflation Reduction Act. We were anticipating it passing, or being considered a year prior. And then when it didn't happen, it didn't look like it was going to happen. And then it just came out of nowhere. And so everybody's been kind of scrambling to catch up on a number of different parts of it. And so, let's dive into some of the details and where the rubber will meet the road. Of course, I with Mitsubishi Electric, I'm very much focused on the heat pump aspects of the incentives. There's definitely things that are going to drive electrification, moving off of fossil fuels throughout. NEPA's done a great job of going through and identifying those different pieces. For those of you on the call that may not be familiar with it, high performance cold climate heat pumps are being installed all across New Hampshire currently by contractors, that are trained by the various manufacturers that offer this product, including us, and sold through local distribution channels across the state. Heat pumps come in a variety of shapes and sizes to accommodate pretty much any needs. And even in the furthest northern reaches where it's really cold through the deepest of winter, it's still entirely possible to appropriately size equipment and displace all of the heating needs that you'd have. In fact, I live in Portland, Maine, not exactly the coldest part of Maine, but last January was a pretty cold one for us. Wasn't like we got the super cold weather, but we got some extended cold. And what was really weird about some of that cold weather was that we had a lot of wind with it. So here's a snapshot. All these snapshots are from January 11th. Of this past year, when it was 2 degrees Fahrenheit here in Portland and the wind chill was -15. My house is pretty modest, and I heat it with two 1-to-1 heat pumps that are rated for 12,000 BTUs, and their total consumption combined on that day, you can see in the green chart, kind of tops out around 3,100 watts, the same as a toaster oven and a vacuum cleaner. And so oftentimes there's a lot of concern about the grid crashing or something like this. And really, if you have appropriate sized equipment, there's really not that much burden on the grid. And there are long-term studies by ISO New England and other places showing that there's plenty of capacity, and the changes that we need to make to the grid over time are truly manageable. My house is certainly, pretty modest, but there are larger homes across the region in New Hampshire and in northern Maine and in Massachusetts that use multiple heat pump systems in order to displace all of their heating load. These are all examples where they use zero fossil fuels, and the same is true for my house. And then even when it does get truly cold, here's a social media share from Colorado contractor checking on a second home up in the mountains, and the ambient temperature -22 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside still perfectly comfortable 69 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's where it's at. So I always kind of throw those introduction slides in there because there's still a lot of misinformation about the ability of heat pumps to perform well in cold temperatures or the impact on the grid. And we just got to keep spreading the word because it's the direction that we've got ahead. Now, in terms of codes, Aaron and Dee Dee pointed out that there are provisions in IRA to support changes to codes in different states. Probably from our perspective, one of the most important ones for New Hampshire to really work on is the allowance for what are called A2L refrigerants. So I don't know how many folks on the call heard that the US Senate passed the Kigali Agreement, a Kigali amendment to the Montreal Protocol, but that is something that many countries passed in order to make a step down in refrigerants and reductions for carbon emissions and global warming potential of refrigerants and other gases. And basically, we're going to transition, the US is going to transition from the refrigerants that are currently used in every manner of refrigerator or rooftop appliance or heat pump on people's houses to a unit that has a lower global warming potential in the refrigerants. And it requires code changes in order to allow those new A2L refrigerants. And many states have passed legislation or made changes to their codes in order to accommodate that. New Hampshire still has not done that yet. There's time. This is probably the year to do it, but it would be it would be a good time to make those changes now. And I really, this is just putting it all up on one screen, but Aaron and Dee Dee did a great job of covering this. The primary things that we're really focused on are really the 25C tax credits. And of course, across the tax credits, one of the things that's really fantastic about them is that the criteria is relatively simple. There's no additional, process or compliance that needs to be complied with, except for the rules that are set forth by the IRS for receiving that tax credit, and it's unlimited. So there's no limit on the number of folks in New Hampshire that can take advantage of these tax credits, and they're around for a long time. In most cases, 10 years. So that really will give people the opportunity to lay out their projects and move forward with them. That's probably the biggest boon all across the board to the market. Now, HEHARP and the Homes Act get a lot of attention because the incentives are so attractive. But when you start drilling down into the numbers, as Erin was really kind of doing there, and dividing the total amount of money that's expected to go to the states by the amount of the rebates, you start scratching your head and saying, well, I don't know exactly how that's going to, where the rubber's going to meet the road with that impact. So again, these are sort of the two main categories that will impact most people from the Inflation Reduction Act starting in January. The tax credit is for installations. The changes, I mean, they extended the prior tax credit. So the tax credits energy tax credits that were available in 2021, they sunset at that time. The IRA bill extended them through this year. So that's, 10% on heat pumps up to $300 or something like that. But the new, much enhanced and larger tax credits do not start until installations on January 1st, 2023 or later. So if somebody on the call is like, oh geez, I really want to install a heat pump and I have it scheduled, in December, you may want to postpone it until January if you were to want to take advantage of these tax credits. We're seeing a little bit of that happen in the marketplace. That's just part of the timing for the whole thing. It's only available as a credit against any liability that you have. So households that have a lower income, maybe below $20,000 or $30,000, might not have a $2,000 tax liability that they could receive that credit against. If you've already paid the taxes in and whatever, and you file your taxes, you'll be able to get a rebate against that, but only if you have the amount in the tax liability that you're seeking to get returned to you. The criteria for qualifying for the equipment to qualify is that it has to meet CEE's highest standard, a standard which has actually been in the works and in the shop getting tuned up for this very purpose for the last couple of months, and is expected to get approved by their board tomorrow. So we should have pretty good visibility on what products in the marketplace are likely to qualify within the next month or so. I mean, this also, where the industry is in a bit of a turmoil right now anyways, because we're currently in the process of transitioning from one national testing methodology on energy efficiency standards to a new methodology that has some tougher standards. So we're actually going to have the rating numbers go down as a reflection of how much tougher these tests are for heating and cooling performance in different temperatures and ranges. So that's also coinciding with all these changes, and all of it goes into effect January 1st. So there's an awful lot of dust in the air, and it'll get settled pretty shortly, but there's still a lot of stuff that isn't 100% clear as to what's going to happen. So then we have HEHARP and HERA, and I'm sorry, HEHARP is basically around the electrification of home, high efficiency electric home rebates, and then Homes Act, as Erin and Aditi referred to, is really about making energy upgrades, more energy audits and weatherization and modeling that out. Those kinds of projects could incorporate heat pumps, but you'd only be able to receive a rebate through the Homes Act or HEHARP for that particular measure. So you could participate in homes and do a whole bunch of installation measures and model that out in order to receive those savings. And then if you then did a heat pump, it would be a separate category of grant if those grant funds were available and you qualified across the board. And I want to put a big if there, because the total amount of rebates that are allocated to the states is based on the funding formula to the state energy offices. So across the country, all the states have state energy offices, and every year they receive a small amount of money from the Department of Energy in order to maintain their monitoring activities of energy issues in their individual states and serve as the point of contact for any grant activities like this that might come up. And so in FY22, the total amount that was distributed to those states was just over $56 million. And in the IRA, they pretty much said, well, we're going to give out close to $4.3 billion. It's going to be distributed to the states in the same funding formula as we normally use in FY22. So like that's how we pretty much know what all the individual states are going to receive. And so in this current year, New Hampshire received $477,000. And so if you kind of do a little bit of the napkin math, you come out with something approaching $35 million. The law allows the state to, whether it's through their offices or through a partner group, use up to 20% for administration of those funds. So you shave that 20% off, it gets to about $28 million. If you divide that by some factor, 8,000 or a maximum of 14,000, that's where you get into that 2,000 to 3,500 homes that could be helped. And you're kind of like, well, that's pretty cool. Low income homes are categorized as being below 80% of median household income in New Hampshire is, statewide, and it varies by region, and you'd be able to get some variance by region, but statewide it's about $68,000. And so being under 80% of median would be, on a statewide basis, something like a household income below $55,000, and then moderate income would be sort of $55,000 to $100,000 household income. Those are just sort of category ratings. And so like none of the funds can be spent outside of that range of people, but of course that range includes probably 70% of the homes in New Hampshire. And so 2,000 to 3,500 homes is a very small percentage, less than 1% of homes. So the state, when they're looking at like, how are we going to disperse these funds? We're going to bring these funds in, and what's in the legislation is really regarded as maximums. It's sort of like, no, you can offer, up to, $14,000 as a maximum. You can offer up to $8,000 on heat pumps, but it doesn't require the states to set forth a program to the Department of Energy for that. And the Department of Energy is working with the states to try and figure out how do you guys want to do this? What do you want to do? That's where all the listening conversations go on. And at this point in time, it's not anticipated that DOE would complete that hearing process and provide the states official guidance until maybe March or April of this coming year. And then it's expected that a lot of states might take 6 months before they would define and receive the funds, and then go forth and be able to make these funds go out. It's an awful lot of work for a few thousand homes. And so part of the objective is to set up templates for how the states might use these funds. And so like there are other, there's the advocates that are looking for $14,000 grants for everybody sort of approach to things. The states could theoretically say, yeah, we're going to run the program just like it said, but it's going to be very difficult to do that with the cap of 20% administrative costs. It takes a lot of money to make sure that you're properly screening homes in order to implement these programs and do the kind of evaluations that are required at that kind of a scope. So maybe that's possible, but it's also likely that a state like New Hampshire might look at it and say, we've got a lot of homes that have a high energy burden because of the cost of propane and oil and a high dependence on those, and we're really going to focus on those homes. We've got a lot of homes that receive low-income assistance on heating, where they might decide to focus entirely on homes that have, the highest energy burden and that would fall into those household income maximums anyways. So, and it's also worth mentioning that right now, and for the past number of years, New Hampshire has been pretty effective at taking funds and allocating them to local community action programs, like Southwest Community Services down sort of in the southwest corner of the state, and having those funds go to support the installation of heat pumps in affordable housing dwelling units, multifamily units. And they've been able to, save a lot of money on those facilities and increase people's comfort. So it may be a perfectly good avenue for the state to work with DOE and say, what, here's how we're going to ensure that people qualify for the program, and we're going to get the best value for people, and we're going to reduce future taxpayer burden associated with high operational costs at affordable housing facilities, and we're going to do our best to reduce the number of folks that are calling upon LIHEAP dollars so that we can spread those further. So I think there's a lot of different policy objectives that can be achieved and it's likely that the Department of Energy will provide states with enough latitude in order to design a program that's going to do the best thing for them. And of course, we're we're trying to engage with all these entities as well to seek best outcomes for consumers and to ensure the maximum benefits of heat pumps everywhere. So, what's likely to qualify? Well, the highest performance heat pumps that are already being sold routinely in New Hampshire are likely to qualify under the new standards. We'll find out what CE is going to be tomorrow, and we'll have all of our testings and ratings, and most of the industry will as well, posted sometime in the beginning of December. And so that's when all the smoke will start to really clear about what's going to qualify. But generally speaking, the highest performance cold climate units that are listed on NEEP will and sold routinely in the different states are the products that are going to qualify for the tax credits and also for the HEHARP incentives. So we're definitely going to have to be mindful of things that don't qualify, because there are definitely things that will not meet those standards that are currently sold. So the broader message for everyone to understand when they get questions from homeowners about these different programs, really to just sort of simplify it into that elevator speech. The first part is we don't really know exactly what the guidance will be from the Department of Energy. We probably won't have programs ready to be launched until sometime next fall at the earliest. And how those programs end up rolling out really is very much up in the air at this point in time. It's unlikely to be sort of like an open public forum that people can apply for the full amounts that are outlined in the federal legislation, just because it would be just like vanish so quickly. People would be like, oh my gosh, what happened? Who got the money? And it makes a lot more policy sense to allocate those funds in a methodical way to people with the highest energy burden. And then secondly, the tax credit enhancement, the 25C increase, goes into effect January 1st. And so, you may want to install it now, because that's when the contractor can put it in, and you can still get the smaller tax credit in addition to the incentives that are available through New Hampshire Saves. But if you're looking for that $2,000 tax credit, then you want to wait until January 1st. And one thing that's interesting that I haven't yet mentioned about the tax credit is that it's for any installation of the qualifying energy efficiency equipment during that period of that year. And so you could install a single zone heat pump or a heat pump water heater or any of the other measures that are included and receive that full amount in 1 year. And then the following year, do another installation of eligible equipment and be able to get 30% up to $2,000 in that year. So there's no carry forward of tax credits from 1 year to the next under the 25C program, but you can receive up to that full amount each of the years that it's in play, all the way to 2032. So, you could stage heat pumps, you could stage a heat pump water heater and receive credits for all of those things. Okay, and so just really closing out before questions and answers, just kind of like some of the myths that we routinely see. Just, heat pumps, if they're appropriately applied and selected, can heat anywhere around here, even when it's really cold. I've been heating my house for years without it, and there are people in far northern Maine that haven't used any fossil fuel in many years. It's totally possible to do. The amount of electricity that's drawn from these systems is not so substantial that it's going to crash the grid. ISO New England is forecasting, more than 1 million more heat pumps being added to New England and 1.5 million electric vehicles over the course of the next decade. And they're anticipating a growth in the winter peak rate of about 1.5%. If you took that all together and had that 15% over 10 years added onto the winter peak last winter, it wouldn't even come within the margin of issues with, with the existing grid. And that's discounting all of the improvements that might occur over the course of the next decade. We're going to be just fine. So, and then, heat pumps do reduce carbon emissions. In New England, we have some of the lowest emission electricity across the country. And so regardless of whether you're talking about oil or propane or natural gas, it really does reduce carbon emissions in the ballpark of 2/3 reduction. And then, this is sort of a minor question, but comes up from time to time. People wonder what happens if the power goes out and you've got a heat pump. Well, same thing that happens if you don't have a wood stove. you don't have electricity to run any of the blowers on your burner or your furnace or anything else. So can you run heat pumps on generators? Absolutely, you can. And, of course, they have to be appropriately sized in order to accommodate the electrical demand of the systems. But like the heat pumps on my house could be operated on just a pretty small, 5,000 watt generator from Home Depot if I wired it up correctly. So just sort of those are my last little shots across the bow. But thank you again for having me on and the great discussion. And I look forward to any questions that anybody might have on this or any topic for that matter. So.
All right, folks, we have a lot of questions already rolling in, and I'm gonna dive right into them because I know that for me personally, I think the Q&A is one of the most valuable parts of this. Some of these questions I'm seeing were already answered in the presentations, but maybe we can just swing through them really quickly, just to make sure that we've got them on lock. So can tax credit be forwarded to future years if you don't have enough tax appetite for the year of the install of the equipment? Dana, I hear you answered that right at the end. No, there's no carry forward or carry back, which there is with the solar tax credits, but there's not for the heating equipment. So that is a difference. And I think this is kind of a similar question. Is the 30% income tax credit transferable to a future year, 24, 25? That's the same question essentially, right? Is there a carry forward, right? So in both cases, the answer is no. Okay, so we'll just keep going then. We did have a question about whether the slides will be available. The slides are going to be emailed out to everybody who's on the call. They'll also be available on the Clean Energy New Hampshire member resources page if you are a Clean Energy New Hampshire member. So that's an easy one. All right. So here's one that's well above my head and which I did not hear the answer to. To clarify regarding the block grants and income eligibility, is the town's median income or the resident applicant that applies, for instance, is it a low income household in a non-LMI qualifying town eligible? It's the individual, right? Not the census tract.
Yeah, that's right. It's based on the median income for the area. So you could check the HUD data to find out what the median income is, and it's then just based on the household income. There's no requirement to be in a particular region of the town. I mean, I think it's plausible that the state might be able to, if they wanted to, they could probably navigate something with DOE to, specify a region and get that kind of qualification, but that's a little bit outside of what the language is in the law directly.
Are there any other sort of nuances about the way LMI is calculated or could be calculated that we should be aware of that perhaps are unanswered at this point? I guess that's a broad question, but I'm just thinking, for instance, Dana, you had mentioned that there might be nuances. You might be able to have some sort of regionality in terms of how that median household income is calculated, being statewide versus regional.
It would be here again. We don't really know what the DOE guidance is going to be. They're pretty much going to allow. I'm sure that they're going to allow states to do pretty much anything within the guidance of the law that's there. When you get into like what would meet the standard, the law pretty much, it says the categories are below 80% of median income and then 80% to 150% of median income. Generally in federal programs, they're referring to, what the HUD and census data indicates is the median income for that, for that demographic block. It could be by county. I think it's oftentimes by county in that spot. And so I think the intent of the law isn't really to say, well, look, this whole county qualifies. And then you have people that are well off in that particular county that then are able to benefit from what's intended for, lower income households. So I think that, it's generally going to be a household comparison to the particular area that they are.
So I've got two questions about getting the State Department of Energy to act. That I know there's been a lot of angst and gnashing of teeth in the state of New Hampshire about this. And I think I'd like to put it to Aaron and Aditi because you all have been engaging with the Department of Energy. Do you have a sense? I mean, we heard in your presentation there'll be listening sessions in November through January. do you have a sense of just, where the state staff is at with regards to their enthusiasm to go after these funds?
I can say that we're not quite sure where the state staff is at. I believe that every state staff is somewhat interested in these funds, but there's also a lot of hoops to jump through, perhaps is the way to say it. And also it will take some work to get the applications out. The advantage is that some of the administration is covered in some of the rebates that are available. But I think it's also important that state energy offices start thinking now about how they can implement the programs, and even starting to take steps like stakeholder engagement to hear what the state kind of would like to see, also to start to coordinate with utilities, and to kind of jump back to the environmental justice and equity question from before. It's important to start to see where current programs that New Hampshire offers lines up with the rebates or the LMI indicators in like the HERO Rebates Act and the Homes Rebate Act, because some states, I know in Connecticut, 150% AMI is not what they use to define the threshold for their low income programs. And so so the state energy office should be excited. They should start to convene some stakeholders and also start to probably identify areas where they can start to streamline or coordinate better with what's coming with the federal funding with programs on the ground.
Given that the state is able to build in some of the administrative costs into their request to the federal government, if we were thinking about this from the perspective, I mean, the state has a 2-year budget cycle. Is this the type of thing that we should be talking about building into the budget really right now, this year, in terms of the staffing of the energy office? I guess that's a question for me. I think that I think the answer to that's yes.
Yeah, let's turn that around, Sam. I think you might want to ask them to do that.
Dana, do you have any thoughts about this? I don't know if you've been having. I know your job is about much more than Maine and New Hampshire at this point, but do you have thoughts about how to engage with state energy offices more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, like I think this, the number one thing is that any state that does not draw down the amount that's allocated under this funding formula will go to other states. And so it's a use it or give it to your neighbors kind of a situation. And, for New Hampshire in particular, and this is true for all the states, 20% can be used for administrative costs. That means that the state energy office could hire somebody or 2 people or whatever and pay them to administer the grants through the entire duration of the grant period, and then use residual funds in order to, pay for the delivery teams and the processing or, evaluation or whatever. And so like, it doesn't take much imagination to figure out, that there are ways of making a very straightforward program that would provide real benefit to people in need in your state without making it overly complicated or having it, comply with what might be happening in some other state. What California does with the money is going to be entirely different from what we might consider doing here in New England. And that's just fine. It can be a very simple program. It can totally just help people that have the greatest need, or really just pay for new HVAC equipment in affordable housing. I mean, it could be really simple.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna move on from these questions. I'd like the folks on the call to know that Clean Energy New Hampshire, as an advocacy organization, is thinking very hard about how to engage constructively with the State Department of Energy on this, and I am becoming more confident that we are not in a place in which we will be one of the states that is sending money back to other states. But there's a lot of time left. We need to wait for guidance to come out. That's not going to happen until spring. So there's time to start to build the consensus that that's the way we need to go. Real quick one that I know the answer to. So wood pellet boilers and stoves were not mentioned in the presentation, perhaps by dint of the fact that Dana works for Mitsubishi and not for TARM or another wood pellet company. In fact, so the BTU Act, which was a piece of federal legislation that the pellet industry has been trying to get passed for years, was sort of lumped into the IRA. The one change was that the 30% tax credit that the BTU Act was looking for was capped at $2,000 a year. So that was one of those, from my friends in the pellet world. That was one that they're happy with 10-year runway. They're less happy with the cap at $2,000, but indeed a wooden pellet stove can get a $2,000 tax
Yeah,
credit.
and I gotta say, I see in the chat that it's from Bill Bell, my good friend Bill Bell. It's great to see him still tuning into all this stuff after all these years. And yeah, you're totally right, Bill. Pellet stoves and pellet boilers are completely part of this program and eligible for 30% up to $2,000. The one caveat, it along with heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. So under the 25C realm, you've got stuff like windows and doors that can get up to $600 for this, up to $1,200 cap. And then you've got the $2,000 cap category, which includes heat pumps, pellet boilers, pellet stoves, and heat pump water heaters. And so you can't exceed 2,000 in this bucket, and you can't exceed 1,200 in this bucket, but overall you can get up to 3,200 in any given year for those technologies. So you could put a heat pump, heat pump water heater in this year, the following year put in a heat pump, the third year put in a pellet stove, and you'd be able to receive 30% up to $2,000 on each one of those installations for that tax credit without the credits going one year to the other.
And similarly, geothermal heat pumps are the tax credits are applied to those as well. And theoretically, I actually don't know the answer to this question. Are geothermal the types of appliances that could be part of the homes program as well, if the state wanted to design it that way?
Well, so the geothermal is in the same category. They're actually in a different program from 25C. That's 25D, the same program that has the solar. So geothermal, and my friends in geothermal will remind me of this. There's no cap, ha ha ha. But
right. So it's a renewable energy. It's considered a renewable energy technology as opposed to a home heating appliance.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that the bill actually made that retroactive to the beginning of this year. I know that there was some sort of question about that in the thing, but I think that that's including this current tax year.
So Chris Ames, who asked that question, if you're looking for details on how the tax credits apply to geothermal, you should actually go back to our last webinar, which is about solar power, but really, was really about all the various renewable energy technologies. So because it would be under that structure as opposed to the structure that we laid out in this webinar. Scott, go ahead, Erin, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to add, geothermal heating might also come into play when it comes to the homes and rebate, because it's measured savings, but it's also unique in that geothermal costs a little bit more right up front in order to install it. So it's probably something that would need to be worked out in regulations, but it's definitely something that can probably be baked into the homes program.
We have a question for folks from NEEP about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund grants. I'm also very curious about these grants, so I'm on the edge of my seat here. How do we see those being deployed? Will they be deployed to many individual organizations or primarily to larger entities, such as in the same vein as the way a national green bank might work?
Yeah, so sorry to disappoint you, Sam. The EPA is still figuring that out. But they do have national public listening sessions and a stakeholder engagement strategy, and I can link that down below for whoever wants to access that.
I was going to say that I believe I'm missing some of those listening sessions while I'm on vacation here. Nora, give me a second. I'm going to try to read these questions in advance before I try to read them live.
Yeah.
Are there prevailing wage or apprentice requirements to enable to attain any of these tax credits? I know there are in the renewable energy tax credits. I don't recall anything in the home heating realm. So I think the answer to that is no, that there is there's nothing about prevailing wage as far as we know.
The prevailing wage piece, the only piece that I'm aware of that involves prevailing wages is the 179D that pertains to commercial tax credits. So if you're working on a commercial program, or commercial projects routinely, you want to get very familiar with the 179D. That increased to $5 per square foot if you're meeting prevailing wages, and a bunch of other categories of things for their highest incentive levels.
So a question about the building code grants. So what do the code grants cover more specifically? The cost of learning about code changes, cost of municipalities coming to meet the codes? Is it just sort of like an incentive to get municipalities to adopt new codes?
So I will read off what they have covered in the language, because again, still figuring everything out. But it will be to adopt the most recent codes. The funding can also be used for training, enforcement, compliance, and for the municipality or state to measure compliance with code. And report that compliance back to DOE, and then also to adopt a zero energy code. It can be used to implement a plan for any jurisdiction to achieve full compliance with the zero energy code. So some of it can cover training and enforcement compliance, I guess is my answer for now. And we'll see how broad that bucket is as it gets implemented.
All right. So folks, we're coming to the end of our hour here. A big thanks to everybody who's on the call, and especially to our panelists, to Dana, to Aaron, and to Aditi. If you have further questions for us, please do not hesitate to send them our way. I'd encourage you to send them to hello@cleanenergynh.org, and we will forward them on to the appropriate panelists to try to get an answer for you. And stay tuned in. I think we're going to keep trying to have as many of these webinars as are necessary to unpack all of the many pieces of this bill are needed. So we'll try to have another in December. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye all.